Lake Itasca Region Pioneer Farmers Royalty of the Year, Jim Cairns and Sue Skadsum, our king and queen for this year's show. Jim Cairns does not know how to ride through a parade in this kind of a Ford, I can tell you that. He's used to the tractors.
Yes, it is free.
Here's a nice running 1912 75 horse Case steam engine owned by Ryan Sorensen from Ashby, Minnesota. It is so great to have that live stream at the show. It's a real thrill to see that every year. Coming up the way here, we've got another tractor that is new to us this year. Very exciting to have it here. We have not had very many of the big old prairie giant gas tractors here in the past. So we are fortunate indeed today to have this 1917, sorry my eyesight's not what it could be, 1917 3060 Auto Taylor, owned by Ken Roberts from Itasca, that's being operated today by Mr. Terry Baird. Thank you for bringing that down, you guys. It's a great addition here. Earlier in the day, they had one on the thrashing machine, and none was looking watch. Here's a half-ton Chevrolet pickup owned by the Lake Itasca Pioneer Farmers, being driven by Keith Coleman. It's been painted up as the old John Deere service trucks that the dealerships used in the old days. And following that is a 1948 F5 Ford truck, formerly owned by Bratland Trucking, and been donated to the Pioneer Farmers. And Myron Winkleman, the driver of that. Here's a 1960 International Bumper truck. This truck was purchased new by the city of Bemidji and served until 1986, when Alaska Township began its department in 1988. This truck was the first truck. It was used for several years. Bemidji fighter Jeff Stein got it running and donated it to the Pioneer Farmers. And Jeff passed away from cancer in January of 2024. So today it is being driven in his memory, as well as for its own historical uniqueness. Thanks, guys. Here's a 1950 Chevrolet fire truck, also owned by the Pioneer Farmers, formerly owned by the Northwest Panelboard Company. Then we have a 1925 one-ton Chevrolet truck, also owned by the Pioneer Farmers. Used to be Ernie Anderson's truck that he used to drive around down here with. Next up, we have a 1912 Rumley Oil Coal. It's owned by Ole and John Alden from East Grand Forks, Minnesota. And this tractor was bought new by Ole's grandpa by people Falls who was sold. Never been on the family. It was started in 2012 for his 100th birthday. And so we're real proud to have it here. This next bunch of big handlers. Doug Anderson and his crew, every year they keep the garbage picked up, keep this place clean and nice. Let Doug take in 39A farm off old wagon, and they're doing the job that nobody else wants to do. Everybody else down here having fun, and they're all picking up the garbage and keeping the place up nice. So give them a nice hand, folks. Cam Harsted coming up next from East Grand Forks. We've got a 1928 model W Rumley Oil Coal, beautiful restoration, actually second time restoration. That tractor was in an accident about 35 years ago and got pretty badly banged up. We got it going and we brought it back. We're thrilled to have it back here. Here's Mr. Adam Stelzberg from Bemidji. It's got a 1926, 2744 Twin City, and that's the biggest size that they made. And that series of tractors, there are not very many of them around. It runs beautifully. And we have Bruce Sly from back. We're running the Pioneer Farmers Depression tractor, or what? You know, the Model A Ford. And then Gary Thomas from back with his 1915 replica Wilson tractor that he built. That was a real branded tractor. They had one wheel in the back, and there aren't really any originals to be had, so he built one just looking at pictures. So it was pretty good. Now here we have Rick Ferguson, who's driving his great-grandfather's Joe Wrestler L-Case, which was got new in 1936. He's the fourth generation owner. He said there's two generations after him to go, so it's the sixth generation tractor. Still got the original manual and everything. It's pretty neat to have a tractor stay in the family that long. Got the factory rubber on it too, which is also not very common on an L. Here comes Terry Hoy from Bagley, from Itchy now, I guess, driving a 1954 Super MCA. Today it looks like he might be campaigning for office. There's a 1935 F12 International by Gary Johnson from Bagley. Wyatt Hurd is the driver. Notice he has a single front wheel. And that's not very common anyway, but especially on steel wheels, you see the more there. There's a 1936 2 on here. Sold by Jake Stinson and Gary Johnson from Bagley, and Kaylee Stinson is driving that one today. And then a 1938 F14 Farmhome owned by Kari Stinson from Bagley. And then 1941 H John Deere, also owned by Gary Johnson. And Brandon Wassey on his 1949 G John Deere. That's one that came down from his grandpa Ken Pelt. And Brandon's been bringing it down, keeping it going and pulling it. And that's just a great thing to see. 1950 MD Farmall, owned by Owen Severson from Bagley. So MD stands for diesel. The diesel version of the M. Then we have a 1935 John Deere B, owned by the Hines family from Rogers, Minnesota. Here's a 1947 H Farmall from Shevlin. Jim and Will are driving it, and they've got the two-bottom international plow behind it. Model 8C. And they've been using it. It's all shined up. 1927 LP, owned by John Eldon and Paul Danielson from Danforth. It's got kind of a unique version of the factory rubber on it. I've never seen one quite the same as that. Pretty neat wheel configuration on that one. And then a 1949 LA case, also owned by John Eldon from Grand Forks. Next we have a 1951 CA Alice Chalmers, owned by Alex Willard from Solway. The main difference in the CA is they added one more gear to the transmission, so it had 4 speeds, and they also put those power adjust rear wheels on it. Here's a very nicely restored 1959 D17 Alice Chalmers, owned by Graham Horsley from Bagley. And following that, a 1947 PAC case, also owned by Graham Horsley of Bagley. Here's Gene Hogan from McIntosh with his Farmers Union number 3 co-op tractor. Gene does a lot of work around here, pulling you around on the people movers, and appreciate all of his work down here. 1948-20 Massey Harris coming next, owned by Les Bly from Waubon. And a 19 38 Toro truck owned by Jim Peternell from Lake Itasca. That's the rare one there. Here's Carl Johnson from Boston area driving a 1962 Oliver 880. Next we have a 1943 2N Ford, and that's owned by Neil Seeger from Detroit Lakes. He's got the mounted Dearborn two-bottom plow on the back there. I guess that was the Ferguson. Next up we have a Massey Harris self-propelled combine. That is the first one. That is the very first one. That's the one that they went out demonstrating with. It's quite a piece of history there. That was the start of the famous Massey Harris Harvest Brigade combines, Model 21. And that came out immediately preceding World War II, and it was a fortunate thing because all the men that were normally on the crashing crews off fighting the war, they came in at just the right time for the harvest to continue. Here's a 1943 C. Alice Chalmers owned by Mason Johansson from Bagley. And then a 1955 TO-35 Ferguson owned by Carter Anderson from Detroit Lakes. Those aren't very common. That was the last tractors that Ferguson built before they merged with Massey Harris to form the Massey Ferguson Company. Here's a 1955-70 John Deere owned by Warren Woodward from Clinton, Minnesota. 70 is the tractor that replaced the G in the old leather series line. And then 1949 R John Deere owned by Alan Woodward from Linden. Following that, a 1954 850 Ford owned by Colton Clausen from Solway. And next up is a 1958 John Deere, also owned by Colton Clausen from Solway. The A's and the B's were made from the 30s through the 50s. They went through many changes. This is one of the last versions with the pressed steel frame. It's got the shift all on one lever. The earlier ones were on two. And of course, styling changed through the years. There's a 1950 WD-9 McCormick Deere owned by Randy Hendricks from Bethsaida, Minnesota. WD-9 was the biggest tractor in the McCormick lineup at that time. And here's a pretty rare bird here, a Model 300 LT, 1955 model. That's owned by Chase Hendricks of Bethsaida. The 300 replaced the H in the old letter series lineup, but you don't see hardly anything in propane. Here's Colton Olson from Boston with his 1961 560 Farmall tractor. That is a diesel, very nice restoration there, and following that is his 1959 460 Farmall. Here's another tractor that went through many styling changes as they've built it for many, many, many years. This is one of the later Cubs you'll see, a 1963 Cub Farmall owned by Carter Ford from Zimmerman. Here's an earlier Cub coming right behind it, a 1958 model Cub. That's owned by the Ford family of Zimmerman as well. There's a 1940 RC Alice Chalmers owned by Corey Hemrick from Zimmerman. The RCs are not very common. It's a WC with a C engine in it. It was built to compete with the F-14 Farmall. Production halted after 1941 during the war and it never resumed. So they only made about 5,000 of those. Here comes a 1948 Farmall Cub that's owned by Brad Ice from Wadena. They're pulling the kids' tractor pull skid and tractor behind as a little advertisement. As soon as this parade is over, the kids' tractor pull this year will be over in front of the church. So over across between the church and the fence. They're going to have it over in front of the church. So just so you know, it's not going to be in the normal spot in front of the announcing stand on the tractor pull track. But immediately following the parade, they'll have the kids' tractor pull in front of the church. Here's a 1950 M Farmall owned by Talon Fredrickson of Bethsaida. Very, very rare to see an M with a single front wheel. Here's a Super MTA 1954 model owned by Mike Schuffman from Itasca. TA stands for torque amplifier. That was the earliest power shift that they came up with, a one-speed power shift. They had two speeds in the gear to get a little more power when you needed it without shifting. 1957 230 farm model owned by Liz Schuffman from Itasca. And then in 1956, the WD-45 Alice Chalmers owned by Ethan Thorson from LaPorte. Here's Pete Dickinson with a 1953 DC case and the mounted Eagle Hitch 3-bottom plow. Eagle Hitch was Case's answer to the 3-point hitch. And it's also got the pulley on the front up by the front end. That's to get the belt over the wide front end for doing belt work. A couple of interesting features on that tractor. 1952 SC case owned and driven by Luke Dickinson. And then we got a 1951 VA case owned by Pete Dickinson from Park Rapids and Cooper Ballman, the driver. Here's the 1963 G705 Minneapolis Moline. That's owned by Kelly Anderson from Bagley. Following that, a 1950 ZAE, also owned by Kelly Anderson. Here's a 1939 Model 70 Oliver Wolcott, owned by Corey Gunderson from Leonard. And he's driving that memory of his grandpa, Ivor Gunderson. Ivor, a long-time member down here, very active in the show. And Ivor always drove that tractor and pulled it in the tractor pull, and Corey's been keeping up with that. This crawler tractor coming up the way here, this is the one that was originally used up at the Roy Hemrick sawmill. That's the sawmill up on the hill there. When Roy had his logging operation in this area, this is the cat that he used. It's a 1946 TD9 International. And it's got an Isaacson hydraulic motor on it. That's the same engine and everything that was in the WD9 tractor that was by a wheel doing a mile ago. It's owned by Roy Hemrick. There's a 1953 Super H Farmall owned by John Woods Jr. from Chevrolet. And then we have a 1946 B Farmall, also owned by John Woods Jr. from Chevrolet. That one's got the single front wheel. The B's, you can do that because the B had that wider front end, so there wasn't as much danger of tipping. The A was narrower, and that's why they always have a wide front on them. Here's a 1936 B John Deere, owned by John Fredrickson from Bemidji. And following that, a 1939 B John Deere, owned and driven by Brian Ramsrud from Bagley. He apparently brought a few fans with him. That's fine. I'm a fan of Brian too. He's a good guy. Got some of the big equipment coming through now. Starting out with a 1953 V8 Caterpillar. That was owned by the Ford here. That one's got a Caterpillar angle going on. You can angle it either way. Cable lift on there. Here's a 1945 V8 Caterpillar owned by Leroy Anderson from Grantsville, Wisconsin. This was the one that owned by Clearwater County. It's called up a Clearwater County unit number 1 tape top on the hood. Following that is the 1930 60 Caterpillar owned by the Bucks, being driven by Dirk Coates today. That was also originally owned by Clearwater County. And that tractor right there, most of the roads you go on to get here today. So good enough for all these years. Running good. Following that is a fleet track on the DG. Owned by the Pioneer Farmers, being driven by Barry Wilkins today. Barry did a lot of work to get that cat running again. Ernie Anderson had that cat in the past, and it's been sitting for a long time. So we're glad that Barry came down here and took an interest in it and got it running. Oh, it's Ken Breen again, the sequel. Is that what you call it? Is that kind of like a depot hack, that quantity? Just a runabout? My hearing is as bad as my eyesight. Ask Ken more about the car. I'm sure he'd love to tell you. Here's a 1949 R John Deere owned by Walter Tighe from Bagley. Alex Tighe's driving it. We'll see that tractor quite a bit during the tractor pull. It does all the pullback, and plus he always does a real good pull with it. Here's Ray Tighe with his 900 case diesel. You see it says Dad's diesel on their fuel tank. That was the last tractor that their dad Arnie was working on when he passed. And Ray finished it up and brought it down here. And he pulls that one every year. And just a real good testament to the love of old iron that his whole family has had for years. Following that is the 1918 case cross motor owned by Ray. Cross motor cases were the ones that they had before they came with the grade series, the L's and C's. Next up is the 1950 D case owned by Ray Tighe from Bagley. His daughter Olivia is driving that, and his wife Megan coming behind on the 1950 DC case. In the case of the cases, if it has C after the letter, it stands for cultivator. So it's a row crop is all that means. The D is the standard, and the DC is the row crop version. Here's a 1929 1530 McCormick Gearing. And that was owned by Brandy Colson in Callaway. Roy Colson is driving. Yeah, Brandy is the one who's waving. Roy just helped her out. Here's Leroy Colson's 1936 D John Deere. A nice smooth ride. Following that, a 1926 1530 McCormick Gearing. That's also owned by Leroy Colson. Yesterday, this point making 200 or more, but today it's working free. It isn't Leroy. No comments from Leroy. Leroy would rather be on the John Deere. He's kind of a John Deere man. I can tease Leroy a little bit. He used to be my neighbor. They just took it out of the shed, so that's pretty good. Here's a 1937 Cage John Deere owned by Alan Johnson from Bagley. And then we have a 1937 B John Deere. That's owned by Avis Johnson from Bagley. And this particular B is a little bit scarce because it's got a shorter frame than the standard one. It's kind of an interesting feature on that one. There's a 1942 BR John Deere, and that's owned by Rocky Colson from Warroad. Keith Graves is the driver. The BR is the regular or standard version of the B. And then a 1945 B John Deere, also owned by Rocky Colson. And then we got Rocky himself coming along behind on a 1939 B John Deere. Rocky's kind of into John Deere. He's not like his brother Leroy. He won't jump brands at all. Here's another 1939B, but this one is an Alice Chalmers, owned by Josh Olson from Roseville. And then a 1941 H Farm Mall, that's owned by Brandon Ice from Watford City, North Dakota. He's got the people mover on the back. Is that all relatives there, Brandon? Or you've got some strangers that you don't know there? They'll take them all. He's not fussy. Here's a 1940 H Farm Mall owned by Garrett Beckwith from Earhart. It was not actually uncommon to see that with the years steel in the front row. A lot of farmers bought them that way because they were a little cheaper that way. Here's a 1956 W400 International owned by Virginia Colson from Earhart. And that's kind of a scarce one. The 400 replaced the M in the letter series line, and there was never as many 400s with M, but the standard version, the W400, is actually quite rare. Here's a 1960 630 John Deere owned by Russ Graves from Colby. One of the last of the two cylinders. And following that is a 1954 720 John Deere, also owned by Russ Graves from Colby. 720 traces its roots back to the G John Deere. 720 replaced the 70. The 1951 R John Deere, owned by Patrick Jerry from Deer River. And then a 1951 AR John Deere owned by Rocky Colson from Roseville. AR, unfortunately, is the standard version of the A, also not nearly as many of them as the regular A. 1948 B John Deere, that's owned by Victor Colson from Osage. Got the number 5 sickle mower mounted on the back. Here's Arlen Dalkey from Bagley with a 1959 530 John Deere. Very nice restoration. Again, another one that's kind of the last of the two cylinders. 530 traces its roots back to the B John Deere, having replaced the 520, which replaced the 50, which replaced the B. Here's a 1936 A John Deere owned by Brian Colbuck from Bagley. And behind that is a 1937 BR John Deere. And that's owned by Logan Merchant from Bagley. Following that up is Logan's grandpa, George Mortenberger, with his 1950 R. That used to be George's BR too, but he gave it to his grandson. George, did you know that I am available for adoption? Should you decide to get rid of any other of your tractors? You can adopt me, I'll be your grandson. Here's a 1949 MT John Deere, owned by Paul Lundberg from Salt Lake. The MT is the tricycle version, or the row crop version of the M. And they're more scarce than the M's, and the M's aren't that common. But the MTs, I think, are more scarce than the M's by far. Here's a 1943 8 John Deere owned by Ricky Marsh from Shella. Byron Marsh is driving it. And it's not that common on that era A to see a wide front. The wide fronts were never as popular as the narrow fronts because it cost more money. Here's Byron's 1939 B John Deere. Zach Marsh driving it. And then a 1937 F12 Farm Mall, also owned by Byron Marsh. That's being driven by Ida Marsh. We've got a 1936 A John Deere, also owned by Byron Marsh. Trevor Marsh, the driver. And here's a 1937 A John Deere, owned by Keith Butler from Lake Itasca. Keith, of course, has got the wagon train memorial building down on the street by the church there, and I encourage you to take that in. There's a lot of history down there. There's a lot of work on that building. I've been on the CT for to tell you all about that. And the 1937 B John Deere owned by Travis Larson from Romeo. that Mississippi? Michigan, yeah, that's right. I should have paid more attention in school. This Steve Butler's GP John Deere. At one time, John Deere had two tractors in their line, the P and the GP, and the GP was considered the row crop tractor. And then the 1947 30 Massey Harris owned by Lynette Fowler of Lake Itasca. And that's the tractor that Lynette's dad bought brand new when she was a little girl.